and welcome to this month's monthly Maxim. So this is for April 2021. My name's Annette Capri. I'm the CEO and founder of the Quantum Dojo. And each month we take a kind of snippet of wisdom, usually an ancient maxim or some words that have been written that will be then transmuted into something that helps mission-driven entrepreneurs. This month, however, though, we've chosen something a bit more modern, so it's not so much ancient wisdom, but more kind of up to date. It's probably not a surprise that Bruce Lee will be featured, and obviously he wrote a many amazing amount of quotes and things that we could use. But we've kind of specifically chosen this one today for this month, just to kind of really look at what's happening out there globally, but also how, as mission-driven entrepreneurs, you can kind of really pull that in and remain in your center point and keep going forwards on your mission and what it is that you're here to do. So I'll read you out the quote and then we'll kind of dive into it a little bit. So he did a lot about water. He talked a lot about sort of flowing around things. But this is just one that I think is, really good for what we want to talk about today. So be like water making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around or through it. If nothing within you stays rigid, outward things will disclose themselves. So there's a couple of really key things we want to kind of really emphasize. So when we talk about being like water, making its way through the cracks and finding a way things, there's one element that he says there, do not be assertive, and later on he talks about staying rigid. So we'll kind of address them separately. But when I think about mission-driven entrepreneurs, sometimes, a lot of the times, entrepreneurs can be quite steadfast in the sense of, they have a focus, they have a direction, they have goals, they have things they want to achieve, things they want to do, which is great. That's all the yang side. But if we are too attached to that, too controlling over that, if we are too much on that yang side, we're not allowing the fluidity, we're not allowing the intuition, we're not allowing anything else that's beyond what we feel we are driving. So one of the quintessential things that's really important about that quote is that this kind of art of non-attachment, of letting go. So when we do this in terms of a strategy, we'll look at setting a particular intent, and then we've got to let go of it. Because the more you kind of control and strangle it, the more you are not allowing the flow. And if we think about water, and in this context of flowing through the cracks, finding a way around it or through it or whatever that might be, water doesn't tend to, if we kind of personify water, it won't reach something and go, okay, so how are we going to do this? How am I going to really force this out my way? Now, obviously, water can be very, very powerful, and we know it can erode things over time. So yes, it can use its power and force, but equally, the essence of this idea of this quote in terms of the cracks, it will also find the path of least resistance. So when we talk about making ridges through valleys and things like that, that's done over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, that's a different use of the force. The force in the first instance would have been flowing, trickling, and all the rest of it. So let's just look at this whole thing about rigidity that I just always see from an entrepreneurial perspective. This is why people can become very closed to outside help or outside kind of ideas. Because sometimes in entrepreneurship, we can be very independent. It can be like, well, this is my idea, this is my baby, this is my business, this is my everything. And then we can become too attached to that and not understand that actually interdependence is going to be a much better way to approach it. Because yes, you might be the expert at your thing, and yes, you might be the person that brings all the life and the passion and everything else to it. However, don't underestimate this idea where he's talking about but adjust to the object, this idea that there is other things available. And I think the real importance to me here, this do not be assertive, and if nothing within you stays rigid, what that speaks to me about is this thing of letting go. When you are more open to talking to other entrepreneurs, talking to other sort of specialists or experts or whatever it might be, that's often where a lot of the gold and the magic can happen, because sometimes a conversation with somebody else will make you go, that's a good idea, or oh, actually, now I've spoken to you about it, I've solved my own thing, because a little bit of insight or intuition will come through. And so it's really important to feel that on a mission, I use the word mission driven, and driven is a good word in the sense of the mission drives you. That is what's kind of calling you and pushing you through. But at the same time, it's important to understand that driven doesn't mean, as he's saying there, do not be assertive. It's not an aggressive, assertive smash. Driven to me is more about consistency and persistence, and the fact that you are going to be on this for a long time, that you've taken up this mission because it means a lot to you and it's heartfelt, as opposed to this is some goal or target I've got to smash and bust my way through to prove something. It's not about that at all. And the other thing to really hone in on here, outward things will disclose themselves, is what I just talked about in terms of other insights, inspiration, connections, opportunities, possibilities then come forth when we let go. And I'm sure there's a time you can probably think of where something didn't quite go according to plan, or it wasn't quite how you wanted and expected it. And so sometimes you could feel the disappointment and feel like, okay, maybe this wasn't, maybe it wasn't a success, it was a failure. But actually, most of the time, you can look back at those kind of things and then you find that actually that was a gift. That was a gift, because if I hadn't have had that experience, then I couldn't have done this. And if I hadn't have gone through that, then that wouldn't have given me the idea of whatever it might be, or that you've met different people. And people are always really, really important in that kind of catalytic sense, because often, as I said, if you say as a solopreneur, it's really hard because then everything is of you. And whilst there's nothing wrong with that, we've all got our own, skills, abilities, talents, gifts, whatever you want to call it. But actually, when we then communicate and when we flow, we're opening ourselves up to something much, much bigger and beyond what we can currently perceive, which can be quite a small, if we're looking at it on a linear perspective, it can be a small piece of it. So I always like to talk about the whole, and why we always do all our work holistic and sort of fully rounded. And I'll often kind of use this shape of a ball to go all the way around, because for me it's really, really important to be having that complete global view, not just the perception of the entrepreneur at the time. So if we are looking at this quote and saying, like, be like water for April, look at what's going off around the world. And obviously this isn't probably the forum to kind of get into that, but I'm just saying that look at the way people cause and effect, look at the way things get put out, look at the way people respond, look at the way that people feel they need to do this or they need to do that, and so on. Whereas if you say stay true to you, and you stay true to your mission and who you came here to be, and you are able to not be affected by the outside negative forces, and you can stay true to your sovereign being and who you are on your mission, and then you can just learn to flow and swirl around, then everything will stay good for you. And even if on the surface we might perceive it as, oh, that was a bit of a left turn I shouldn't have taken, or maybe that right turn wasn't that great an idea, as long as it's your idea, then it's always going to be fine. It's always going to work out to be the best thing that you could have done at the time, because that was based on how, as long as it's how you felt, as long as you feel very congruent in that decision, as opposed to, oh, this person's telling me that and the media is telling me this and therefore I ought to, should, have to, so on and so forth. So for me, within this quote, it can look like it's all about being submissive and kind of just letting it go, but it isn't. Because the thing is, as I said, we know water to be a very, very powerful force. It's just that it has the adaptability to be able to be doing this first thing of flowing through cracks, meaning that yes, it's a gigantic oceanic planet out there, but it can trickle through cracks, it can flow around an obstacle, it can go through an obstacle if there's a pathway through, and that it doesn't stay rigid. That's the key thing. It's just flowing and letting it go and letting it be. So for this month, I think, have a look for the first quarter of the year and look back and go, okay, at what point did I feel that maybe I was a bit too rigid on that? I was maybe being a bit too assertive and a bit too closed-minded and a bit too sort of like got to, have to, should. And where in the last few months, few weeks, few days have I been more in flow and I've been more open and allowing? And then have a look at how you felt on that. And as I always say, when I look at the yin and yang in terms of, digital entrepreneurship and being a mission-driven entrepreneur and conscious business, I always look at the two. So I always say, like, yang is structure, strategy, systems. We need those things. But yin, when we look at the intuition, imagination, insights, and all these different things, we need them too. So it's always in my mind the blending of those and the way they flow together. So there is a time where we go, okay, we need to work out what the strategy is, because we have to have some sort of focus and direction and flow. We need to be knowing where we're headed. But then at the same time, we then take our hands off of that and allow that universal flow to come through and be aware and conscious of where we need to course correct or adjust, and or where other things might come in where we go, that's awesome, that's just come in, never thought of that. And when you're aware of that kind of synchronicity, we had it with something yesterday. I wasn't quite sure on the direction to take something we're doing, and I was deliberating. I was going, oh, is it this? Is it that? And it didn't feel right. So I just thought, okay, I'm just going to have to let it go because I couldn't get the feeling. I couldn't get the congruence. And as always happens, synchronistically, I had one comment come in from somebody, and then another comment came in from somebody else, and they were the complete antithesis of each other, meaning one came in a very arrogant, assertive, not a very nice energy, and one came in with a very beautiful, aligned, coherent energy and frequency. And I just sort of smiled and went, yeah, okay, that is the thing. It was demonstrating to me on something that I wasn't sure about. And then I physically experienced it, and I went, oh, of course, I'm always going to go for that feeling that was the congruent whole in flow feeling versus this particular person who's gone at something quite aggressive and arrogantly and in a way that's really, really off-putting, and is some, I haven't, but I wanted to reach out to them and say, you did yourself there a really good demonstration of how not to connect with people, how not to market to people, how not to actually want to share your work with somebody else. But I didn't, because I didn't. But anyway, so I just wanted to sort of say for April, moving forward this month, I think it's a good one because we're moving into spring, and obviously you think about spring and brooks and rivers and oceans and all that kind of stuff. So really kind of, play with it this month, see how, and obviously if you get a chance, if you're somebody who's into journaling and stuff like that, write down things that you come across, experiences you have. And also I think one thing is, I said, when you're on the receiving end of it as well, look at other people's communications and energies, and when you're on the receiving end of it, you can feel it. You can feel that energy behind it when somebody's coming from fear, panic, desperation, lack, frustration, anger, whatever they're feeling, that will come through. And equally, when somebody's in a really balanced, centered point and they're just in the flow, you feel that too. And then you just decide, which do I prefer to receive and which do I prefer to give? And then kind of go from there. So wish you all a really, really good April. Let's see what kind of magical things will come about. But stay true to you, stay true to your mission. And as always, if you ever need any help and support, we're here. Just give us a shout and we're happy to connect with you. But apart from that, have a wonderful spring or autumn, depending where you are in the hemisphere. And we'll come back to you next month. Take care. Bye-bye.